Hello guys, welcome back. So this time I wanted to show you other sources of power. So before we pretty much covered already on the three typical sources of farm power. What we talked about animal power, or rather human power, as the most basic, the lowest form of kumbaga pinaka low tech nga source of farm power, but it has its own advantages. Another, we talked about draft animal power. So basically, ang source of farm power is ang atuan ng draft animal. So as was mentioned before, typically here in the Philippines, we are using the kalabaw or the kabaw or the carabao. In other countries, I've seen, by the way, people in Camotes, when we went there, they were using the baka or cattle as their draft animals. In other countries, they also make use of the llamas, the camels, the caballo, the yaks, and everything. Finally, ang pinaka-common, probably pinaka-common this time, is using engines as a source of farm power. So these are the typical three. So for engines, we use fuel. So ang fuels nga gigamit nato is ang gasoline engine o ang diesel, or rather gasoline or diesel. So typically most engines run either on gasoline or diesel, but there are other engines nga naggamit og lain nga fuel. But for most applications, most engines, diesel ra gyud siya og gasolina. This time I want to expose the not so conventional, so non-conventional sources of power. So sometimes these sources are not available sa farm, pero for purposes of sharing this to you, I think it's worth a try. Okay, so this time we will be covering different, the non-conventional, sometimes it's called renewable sources of power. Okay, so as mentioned kaniha, mo na nino, we had human power, draft animal, fossil fuels, or engines. Or you may have noticed I sometimes look to the side. My presentation is actually on a different monitor than my camera. So mo nang ingana. Okay, i-cover na ni. Okay, unsa mang alternative. Sometimes it's called alternative source of power. Sometimes it's called renewable source of power. Sometimes it's also called non-conventional sources of power. Unsa man sila, pwede tang the sun or solar power, pwedeng wind, pwedeng hydro, pwedeng tidal power, kana ganing power sa tides. Sometimes na taob na sometimes, but all the time there's a changing tide every day, depending on the moon phase, but typically we have two high tides and two low tides in a day. So right now people are already taking advantage of that. It's not yet very common, but in other countries they already started tapping that power from the tides. And then waves, so power from the waves, geothermal power pod, we have this one in the Philippines. And then biomass or biofuels. So I will be briefly describing each of these different sources of power. Some are applicable sa farm, some are not, but these are basically the renewable sources. Kumbaga, ang in this time. Unsa man ang conventional for farm, human, draft animals, o engines. For energy requirements, typically, tibok kalibutan, not just the farm, ang common pod is ang fossil fuels. Gibahig na din ha ang gasolina, ang diesel, bunker. Okay, they call it bunker. Bunker oil, fuel gyapon na, or coal, fossil fuel gyapon na siya. Mo na siya ang conventional sources, conventional source of energy na to, or power. Uh, this time we're talking about alternative sources. Okay, so usahon na to ni unsa may ilahang characteristics, advantages o disadvantages. For solar power, basically, actually duha siya ka modes we can take advantage of: electricity or ang thermal nga aspect sa power. Uy, let me just put this one here siguro. Yeah, like that. Okay, so sa electricity, ing ani, I think you're already very familiar with that. Natay solar panel or PV or photovoltaic cells. Okay, by virtue of the photoelectric effect, the sun's rays heating on the photovoltaic cells liberates an electron, causing an electricity to move from the panels into a battery charge controller. Okay, a battery charge controller then charges a battery and then stores that energy there. Sometimes an inverter is needed to convert DC or direct current nga kuryente into alternating current mo na inverter. Usahay po diretso ra pod, and then from the battery ato na siyang utilizon. So kung DC atong gamiton, okay, we don't need an inverter. We just grab the power from the battery. Okay, kung AC po, just like what's typically installed in most homes, kinahanglan ta aning inverter. Okay, so from solar power or solar energy, it is converted into electricity by virtue of this setup. So take advantage na to ang power nga gikan sa sun. Okay. If you have questions, by the way, please don't hesitate to email me or to post questions in our FB page. Okay, you can even comment on this video later on. So I will be uploading this one to YouTube. This will be available for you para ma-view ninyo, and then you can just watch it anytime na gusto ninyo. Okay? Okay. AC, by the way, is alternating current. DC is direct current. Okay, lain pud nga paagi sa pag take advantage sa solar power is gamiton na to ang init lang. So we're not converting it into electricity na. But this time, ang iyang kainiton, utilize na to directly. Still, we can convert it into electricity, by the way, by virtue of this. Sometimes po, init lang, mura lang ta uga init og tubig. So, ang typical na to magbuwad raman kini naapoy mga panels, mura siyang mirrors. I've seen a similar setup in Bais, in Negros. So, daghan kaini nga mga parabolic siya. What it does is ana man siya parabolic, so mura siya curve. Think of half of this scotch tape, then nagatubang siya sa sun, move pud ang uban ana nga setups, depende anya iyang i-focus din sa tunga. Kining sa tunga is basically a pipe a pipe nga naay sulod nga typically tubig nga iyang i-move. So tungod kay dako man ang area dire sa panel, okay, unya iyang i-focus dinhi sa pipe, muinit ug maayo na siya. Nya daghan man siya, iya nang ipump na karon inig-init, it's converted into steam. Unya kanang steam actually rotates a turbine, and then inigtuyok sa turbine, kanang turbine drives a generator, and that generator produces electricity mo na siya i-distribute. Some applications, pinaka-simple, is ang thermal power sa sun, dili na i-convert og electricity. So, pinaka-simple is maglatag lang kag tubo sa imong atop, you paint it black for maximum light absorption, at the same time heat. Inig-init sa tubo, i-run tong linya padung sa imong faucet, especially in temperate countries, not much diri sa tuwa, init na ang imong tubig. So mo nay heating system nga imong gamiton sa imong balay. But here in the Philippines, it's not very applicable kay ngita pa mangani ta og bugnaw nga tubig. All right? So, again, two modes. First, the use of photovoltaic cells. Next, nga pag-maximize or pag-utilize sa power nato sa sun is taking advantage of its thermal power. Thermal power is further converted into electricity or just used as it is. Okay? Next slide. Okay, unsa may advantages ug disadvantages sa solar power? Kini nga tapok here is ang advantages, dinhi ang disadvantages. Renewable. Solar power is renewable, so therefore it's free. So we basically have the sun every day. Of course, we do not have the sun every night because part na po na sa kalibutan. But it's basically free. It goes up every day. Unless, of course, if it's raining, so dili na to ma-maximize na. But it's still there. Walay pollution, okay? Walay byproducts. Excess power could be transferred to the grid. So there are cases na, in fact, here in the Philippines, particularly dito sa Manila area, gani nga na Meralco, so people having a setup with solar panels sa ilang mga atop, sometimes ug wala dili nila magamit, mubalik siya sa grid. So kumbaga ang ilang kwintador mubali og tuyok. That way mugamay ilang bayranan. So instead of using the original setup nga kung gipakita kaganiya, ngayong ani nga naay battery, ila wala naay battery, gisaksak ra pud nila sa grid. Inig abot dito sa grid, mubali ang ilahang pag-ihap sa ilahang kwintador. But para na ako personally, I think it would be better to take advantage, to use batteries para tuwa lang diha sa balay siguro. It's just a matter of preference. Electricity is stored for later use. Now, typically, for example, suga, we do not need lights during the day. So it's good to have batteries because we are switching on our lights ini kagabi na. So during the day na sun, we store that energy sa ato ang batteries, and then later on ikagabi the batteries will power the suga. Okay? Unsa may disadvantages or cons sa solar power? Oh, well, of course, so walay sun, walay power. So during a rainy day, we can only harvest as much. It doesn't mean exactly a zero, but you cannot basically maximize that output from your batteries or kay di man pud niya ma-charge. Initial expense is high. Karon slowly, it's getting a little bit more affordable this time than before. Pretty mahala sa mga kuan sa mga solar panels sa una. This time it's more kanang competitive na ang presyo, so ordinary people can start their own setup sa balay. Ang photovoltaic panels has efficiencies of only up to 15%. Right now ang technology mo pa lang na mahatag nato, so again a lot of it is still wasted, pero still kaysa nga di na to gamiton, the sun is basically there every day and it's free as mentioned sa iyang advantages. Okay, next slide. Wind power. Unsa na po ni? Sa wind power po, we take advantage of the power of the wind. So, this is not applicable in all places kay doon na may minimum nga gipangita nga wind. But for wind, nga atong i-convert into power, ing ani basically ang concept. So, naay hangin, mo blow. So, think of an electric fan and then balihon na to ang function. You can take, naari gani sa usahay that probably you have seen electric fan nga atong ikarga sa sakyanan like motor or motor or tawag ani tricycle, inigdagan na to ang hangin padung sa ato ang electric fan, mutuyok siya. It's basically the same concept here. So when wind blows on that, mutuyok siya, inigtuyok niya, mutuyok siya og generator, inigtuyok sa generator, mo produce siya kuryente. Ang kuryente i-run dito sa grid. Electric fan, kuha tag kuryente gikan sa wall, ipasod na to sa electric fan, mutuyok ang motor, inigtuyok sa motor, mutuyok ang blades, ituyok sa blades, mo-produce og hangin, mura rag bali. So basically these are the basic parts. So ang blades na to has a pitch system, mo adjust siya depende sa kusgon sa hangin. So og kusog kayang hangin makaguba man pod, so ilan ang kumbaga tuyokon kining blade, kini siyang blade ihaning tuyokon para di na ang nacelle is basically the covering, na siya gearbox din ha. Okay, ang yaw system meaning paglingi-lingi niya left right, so kung mo ni mo ana siya mo lingi-lingi siya, matubang siya og asa ang hangin. Sometimes that is automated na, sometimes pod naapoy mag-check pod ana. But for most cases, it's already automated. In the Philippines, there are already mga gitawag na siya og wind farm. So I think you've heard of Pagudpod o dito sa Ilocos Norte. We already have wind farms. There are other places pod nga doon na wind farms nga gipanggamit diri sa atua. So these are very 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 tall towers, around 75 to 100 meters high, and then natay this is called a wind turbine, by the way. So by virtue of the wind, this rotates. When this rotates, okay, it also rotates a generator. The generator produces electricity. That electricity goes to a transformer and then brings it to the grid. So muna na mo supply. Right now gamay-gamay padili pa kayo daghan ang wind nga power nga gi-utilize nato. So basically particularly sa Luzon, for example, the ones that you get from your outlet, the electricity from the wall of your house dito, are actually getting from a mix of sources. Some are gensets. Kita diri sa Cebu, I think we're getting our power still from Naga, so natay power plant din ha. So it's a genset. So ilan ang pakanon og coal, inig pakaon dauban ang coal mo produce og steam. Ang gensets nila are actually driven by external combustion engine. So ang coal, inigsiga sa coal, magluto siya tubig, inig expand sa tubig mo to mo padagan sa piston converting it to rotary motion, and then mo patuyok po to siya og generator. Some power plants are using tawag gini bunker oil nga na. So it's a mix dito sa Luzon. So naay kay na naman sila power, and I think partly pud mix na gani siguro po sa Cebu kay we are also getting power from Leyte kaya na may geothermal dito nga dako sa Leyte. Okay? Okay, pros and cons of wind. Renewable, just like the sun. Walay pollution pod, just like the sun. It does not compete in terms of space kuno kay taas raman ni siya nga mga towers. Underneath, you can still do farming or whatever other purpose. Unless, of course, if you are going to build like high-rise buildings, kung sangit-sangit ni iyahang palabad or ang iyahang wind o iyang turbines. Disadvantages, of course, walay hangin, wala po tayo power. Dako po siya initial expense. Uh, Sometimes ang maintenance can be very expensive. Efficiencies of up to 45%. That's a little bit low. Unya, kinahanglan kag at least 12 kilometers per hour to generate electricity. So for areas nga hinay kayo ang hangin, lisod i-implement ang wind power nga technology to generate electricity. So not all areas are kumbaga pwede nga set upan na to og mga wind farm. So there are only selected areas that we can do that. Next, hydro. Unsa man ang hydro? I'll check the time, 16 minutes. Unsa man ang hydro, meaning tubig. So what it does, mao gyapon. So ang pinaka common denominator here is there is some kind of motion na ay movement of something, and then that movement atong i-capture using turbines para mutuyok ang turbines. Inigtuyok sa turbine, naka-couple siya or it's connected to a generator. So when the turbine rotates, the generator rotates. When the generator rotates, it generates electricity. So going back sa solar katong thermal, mao gyapon na siya gipatuyok. Kadtong wind na siya gipatuyok na turbine. Sa hydropower, it's the same setup. So typically you can find this here, like for example this one, dam na siya. Ang main purpose sa dam is to store water. So once the water is high na ang iyahang level, daghan na, paagason siya dinhi. So this is basically the dam. So this one, mo na siyang ibabag na to. So normally ibabag na siya sa river niya, kadtong sang upriver ibabaw sa dam, mahimo na to siyang lake. Unya downriver padayon ra na siya nga river diha sa ubos. So what happens mo ni, so na siya tubo, this one, these are the tubos that you can find, that is called the penstock. Okay, it's called the penstock pipe. So musod yan tubig, mupadong siya dito sa sod na siya well dito, inig-igo sa, syempre it's moving down man, it's moving down, inig-igo aning turbine or palabad niya, mutuyok ni siyang palabad. Inigtuyok sa palabad, it also makes the generator rotate. So when this rotates, it produces electricity. Electricity, iyan na pong ipasa dito sa grid. Okay? It transmit na po na siya. So just like sa wind, patuyok ko ng turbine, inigtuyok sa turbine, it also drives a generator. When the generator rotates, it produces electricity. Okay, again ha, karon it's getting mainstream, but sa una it's called alternative sources of power. Right now, medyo people are going into it, especially with the pressures of kani-ganing dictated by virtue of climate change, global warming, and everything. People are getting more aware. People are thinking towards more sustainable approaches to power, basically the whole earth. Okay, that's hydropower. Okay, unsa man ang advantages, gilok ako ilong, sorry for that. Unsa man ang advantages ug disadvantages sa hydropower? So it's just listed here. Renewable resource. So basically, in my other class, I was talking about ang hydrologic cycle. Even if the water is going down, eventually it will evaporate. It rains, so it fills up the reservoirs again. So naa na po'y tubig dito sa dam, it goes down again. So cycle tuyok lang. Walay pollution. Okay, walay byproducts. it can be stored pod and then released to coincide with peaks in demand. So gabi pwede nimo i-release ika gabi because of the need of water, pero wala man pud kay tay gikinahanglan nga cooling, so imo lang itansya-tansya. Water used for hydropower can be reused, so pwede pud siya multiple levels. Katong i-mention sa akong amahan sa una while he was working in sa Davao Light, ang ilahang dams mura og 5 ka levels dito sa Mintal sa Davao. So sa primero nga level naa sila'y set of na sila turbines and generator, then mudagan ang tubig pa ubos to ana pud sila lain nga dam dito sa ubos nga mo produce na po sila kuryente na po, then sa ubos na po na po ilain. So yung ana, so multiple levels, dili but pasabot nga once nga moagi na ang tubig, it's wasted already because basically downriver na pa may other users. Disadvantages of the hydropower setup: expensive, okay, mahalang dams. Maintenance is also high. Unya, there needs to be a sufficient amount of supply sa tubig, okay, para nga ma-sustain. There are sa agricultural engineering in particular nga applicable po sa farms na gipang tawag ng mga micro-hydro. Okay, micro-hydro. Gagmay lang siya nga pwede ra siya ibutang og sapa, maka-produce siya og ginagmayng kuryente that we can use sa balay or sa farm. By the way, at the end of the day, duha man ang ato ang kumbaga butangan og power or mo consume of power nga processes. There are stationary nga mga tasks or work nga kinahanglan natong ihuman, ug kadtong mga mobile nga kinahanglan na ay locomotion. We need to move from one place to another. So for example, og maggaling ta og humay, okay, in place naman na. So it's okay to use electricity for that purpose. Kung tahay we want to pump water from a lower elevation padung sa tangke nga taas-taas, it's also okay to use electricity for that. So we can get electricity from the grid, we can get electricity from a micro hydro system, ingana. But for trabaho or field operations wherein you need to move from one place to another, like magdaro, magharo, magharvest, mag-apply og pesticide or fertilizer, those are field operations, dili applicable ang electricity as our source of power. Okay, again, not electricity per se, but ang kuryente is coming from elsewhere. Dili ba na ingon nga kuryente na gina siya daan. Okay? So for field operations, it's difficult to make use of hydro or wind power. Kasagaran yun, it will boil down to those three lang. Either human, katong conventional source na to sa power, either human, draft animal, or engines. Kaya we need to move from one place to another. But like I said, kaganiha for other purposes, katong other tasks sa farm, na stationary lang, it's okay to use electricity. Most sa atong ginatakol karon are actually from a certain source and is converted into electricity. Kini mga alternative nga sources of power. Next slide, tidal power. Kini layo-layo na ni kay most farms nato wala man sa dagat. Okay, layo man. But still, what happens here is it converts the changes in tide energy associated with kanang gitawag na tong sulog associated with the tides nga ang inig sulod sa tubig, inig atras sa tubig, it rotates a turbine again, just like the hydro, okay, thereby producing electricity. This is not yet common. I don't think we have this one in the Philippines, but other countries are already taking advantage of this. So this is an example. Ila na ibutang sa ilalim sa tubig. So inig sulod, inig taob, mutuyok na siya. Okay? Kung saka ng tubig dire, inig balik na pod, kay mughunas na, mutuyok na pod siya in the opposite direction. Both rotation, counterclockwise or clockwise, mo produce siya o kana siyang kurente. So yung ana ragod na siya ang concept. So pareha ra gyapon sa wind kaganiha, pareha ra gyapon sa hydropower kaganiha. So it the movement of something rotates a turbine, and then the rotation of the turbine drives a generator, and the rotation of the generator generates electricity. It's just conversion of energy from one form to another. Again ha, if you have questions, naghalang kong mata na, by the way. It's because I'm facing the aircon. So let me i-fan ako and then shutting it down. Okay? So asa na to? Disturb ko sa aircon. I don't know. So again, as I was saying, it's just conversion of energy from one form to the other. Okay, unsa man ang advantages ug disadvantages sa tidal power? Tako siya potential for future applications because of the vast ocean. So basically unlimited. And then the good thing about the best thing about tidal power is predictable. Kabaluta kanus amo taob kanus amo hunas. Kay basically nagnunot ra man na siya sa movements sa moon. Unlike sa sun o sa wind, it's not that predictable. Disadvantages, well, of course, initial cost, taas pa ng maintenance. Okay, so kinahanglan ka og infrastructure niya i-maintain sa samot na salt water, dali mga daot. Yun. Next, wave power. O, maura po niya concept. Movement gyapon inigdasmag sa wave. Kini lang siguro, no? Lahi ni siya concept. Kini, inigsod sa tubig, mapush ni, mulutaw man ni siya nga platform, mapush ni siya nga actuator. Inig-push ini, it is further converted into rotary movement na later on. Kini siya, this is a different application or different application sa wave power. Inigbanda sa wave, musod ang tubig dire, inigsod sa tubig, mugamay ni nga volume. So, naay hangin, movement sa hangin. So, when water goes in, the air that's already inside is being pushed out. When it is being pushed out, it rotates a turbine. Okay? Inig-atras po sa tubig, mu-vacuum ni, musod na po balik ang hangin. So, it again rotates the turbine in the opposite direction. Still it produces energy gihapon nga. So doon na sila mechanism nga bisan unsa ang direction sa tuyok mo generate siya og kuryente. Okay? So therefore, taking advantage of wave power. Geothermal power, unsa man pud niya? I think this is the final one. So ang geothermal power we take advantage of unsay naa sa ilawom sa earth. Okay, so just the same power nga i-take nga naa sa mga bulkan. So kabalo man ta nga dunay molten rock sa ilawom sa earth. So what happens is na molten rock na po yung mga part ana nga naay mga liki. That's steam actually. This is the picture. That's basically a geothermal power plant. So magpasudlan na tong tubig, mag-drill ta, pasudlan na tong tubig, and then mag-drill po sila dire, dinhi pod mo escape ang init na nga tubig. Kini is molten rock. So we introduce water here, introduce din ha. Okay, muinit na siya, mo expand, so mangitag kagausan, just like the concept in volcanoes. Mo nang mubuto ang bulkan kay na-seal na siya, mangita siya kagausan. So dito ang tubig, when water is heated, it is converted from liquid to gas or steam. That hot water or steam goes up, inig-expand niya, okay, inig-expand niya, mupatuyok na pud siya og turbine. That turbine drives a generator and then inituyok po sa generator, okay, produce na po siya kuryente, ilabay na niya dito sa grid. So cycle lang na siya. Kana nga steam karon is cooled down, natay cooling tower, it's being cooled down, i-inject na po nagbalik dito sa ilawom. Unya man mo init na po na, mo expand, himo na po siyang steam, steam na po niya, mo patuyok na po, tuyok-tuyok lang na siya, ikot-ikot lang. Okay? So, sa Leyte, ang tungunan power plant na didto na dapit sa Ormoc, mao ni ang amo ang source of power didto mainly. Ing ani siya nga concept. So in Davao po na dito sa Apo na sa kaagi ko sa una dito sa Agco sa South Cotabato pag naog na mo sa Mount Apo, kitan pud nimo naapay daghan nga mga geothermal power plants in Negros. You can find also po dito. Diri sa Cebu, I don't think na kay mura magwala tay bulkan din so wala ta ani nga resource in Cebu. Okay? Biofuels or biomass. Kini, this is more applicable sa farm. So what happens here is from crops, mo gani nga bio, okay? Ang biomass basically from crops atong dauban, we convert that one to heat energy. So biomass power na kay mga sagbot, na kay mga kahoy, mga bukong sunugon nimo, that's biomass power. You use that one to heat something, to cook something, or maybe to convert water into steam, and then to that steam into electricity na pod kay mo drive na pod siya og line generator. So external combustion engine nga setup pwede na siya. So that's biomass. Biofuels medyo social pa minahon. Basically these are fuel nga gikan sa tanom. So here is an example. Ipakita niya ang cycle. Sunflower. Okay, so mo to photosynthesize ang sunflower. Okay, mo produce siya og seeds nga naay oil. Niya i-extract ang oil na natay vegetable oil, i-refine, mahimo na siyang refined nga vegetable oil. Unya, by the process of trans-esterification, please do not forget that one. From oil, butangan siya alcohol na trans-esterification, mag-convert na siya into biodiesel. Na siya byproduct nga glycerol nga usable po sa industry. Ang biodiesel mo na imuhang i-fuel. That's why i-fuel sa mga sakyanan or whatever, mga diesel engines, mo nang gitawag na siya og biofuel. Another for example ani, instead of extracting the oil and converting it into biodiesel, ang gina-extract is sugars from sugarcane in particular, or from sweet sorghum, or other crops. Sugarcane lang ta mo, may klaro nga daghan og sugar. Ang sugar is then converted into alcohol. Okay, ang alcohol karon mo na to siya himon nga fuel. It's still biofuel, but ang associated yun na itong biofuel kasagaran is ang biodiesel, but alcohol is also a biofuel. Okay, so you can replace gasoline in gasoline engines with alcohol. Yun. Time? Oh, sakto-sakto rin na itong time. Hapit na mahuman. Ayun, human na. So, by the way, the material that I used is from SlideShare. It's uploaded by Shahan Sahid. I don't really know the guy, but he's from Sri Lanka. So proper attribution lang. Kamo pod, ayaw lang taon mo pag copy paste sa Google. Please acknowledge kinsa ang inyong sources as much as possible. So most of the material in this presentation is from this guy. I'm not sure ginawat pa niya o iya habang gihimo. He's from Sri Lanka, so I cannot follow the exact references niya, but I'm trying to acknowledge him here. Other photos, the pictures that I use were basically searched from Google, and I use it here. So it's now 32 minutes, so that's more or less sakto ra pod sa ako ang target nga tag 30 minutes per video. So I guess I'm done with my presentation. Again, as I've been telling you, please do not hesitate to ask questions. Ang ato ang mode karon is already asynchronous. You don't need to question me directly. Kaya syempre, this is already a recorded video by then when you get to see this one. Pero pwede ra gyud mo post og questions sa ato ang FB group. Again, no PMs. Okay? Pwede mo mag-post og questions sa FB group. Inig-post na ko sa link ani, you can ask. Excuse me. Pwede mo ask og question when I post it there as a comment. And then pwede ra po mo mag-email. Again, ayaw PM kay saba kayo. Again, pag yun, still a lot of you are still sending me emails without following instructions. Mali-mali ang subject, mali-mali ang file name. So please check that out. Make sure sakto na po'y uban mo submit og forwarded message from their classmates. So ang tuyo nato is para mo makat-on, pero kabalo ko hayahay kay tang tanan karong panahon na. So please do your part. Okay? Till our next video, you watch this one, I'll be giving an task out of this particular presentation. Okay? Salamat. Bye-bye. See you next time.